All right, let's go ahead and get started. Kyle, if you'll be nice enough to move to the next slide for me, I'd appreciate it. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. My name is Sandra Elliott. I am the Director of Education here at Spirion, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of information. I'm also going to be your moderator on the webinar today. We are going to be recording this webinar, and we will post it out to the web when it's done. You'll get a notification when that webinar is available. We're also going to email everyone the slides, the recording, and the documentation, any documentation we happen to provide in this webinar to everyone who attended. So keep an eye out for that. If at any point you have difficulty viewing the screen or hearing, we recommend that you check your computer's audio and visual settings first. If you're still having issues, please send us a chat, because if we see 3 or 4 people let us know that they're having issues with audio or visual, we'll know it's on our end and we'll pause to fix that. We take questions throughout, so don't feel like you need to hold back on your questions. Use the chat at any point to send questions, and I'll keep a rolling list of those questions. If we don't get to your question, we'll get to it in a follow-up. So you have a couple of different areas that you can use here. You have the questions area, where if you type a question, we'll actually type the answer to it, and we'll also answer it on screen. You also have a chat window where you can chat with everyone. So if you have problems, that's where you want to use the chat. Questions go in questions, issues go in chat. Go ahead and go to the next one, Kyle. So this webinar is part of our Tips and Tricks webinar series, which we're offering once every couple of months. These are specifically for our existing customers, and they cover important information about how to use Sensitive Data Manager and the other tools that we're going to be offering. This series, we definitely want your feedback. So if there is anything that you want to see, make sure to let us know. We'd love to hear about it. There will be a very, very short 1-question survey that goes out after this. If you answer that survey, you'll have a chance to give us any comments that you want. Let us know about topics that you're interested in, and we'll see if we can't work those in. Okay, one more slide for me, and then it's all Kyle. So everyone, I'd like to welcome you again to the webinar and to introduce you to Kyle Butler. Kyle Butler is a professional services engineer here at Spirion. He's also a tech junkie. He has been here for over a year. I'm not going to guess at how much, but definitely over a year. He's a former customer success manager here, so he's had a lot of experience, probably with several of you who are on the call today. He's also a credited author on one of our most recent patent filings here at Spirion. He works in a bunch of different programming languages. I'm not going to name them all. You can read them on here. The other thing is he's an editor at Spirion's Privacy Please Flipboard magazine. So he does a lot of different stuff for us. I should also note that he and I, when we're not actually having to focus on work, we do kind of goob out a little bit over comic books. There's a lot of that in our lives. So he's a well-rounded nerd. Kyle, it's your turn. Please take it, and I will be happy to turn it over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandra. Today what we're going to be covering with you guys is sensitive data definitions. And I've prepared a very short slide deck. It should not be death by PowerPoint though, so you don't have to worry about that. What we're going to be covering is, first off, why many of our successful clients leverage sensitive data definitions and kind of what they are. We're going to also cover some of the terminology that I'm going to be using throughout the demonstration portion, so you kind of have a clear understanding of what I'm talking about as I'm doing that. And then we'll cover a few key concepts that go into building sensitive data definitions, so that part of the demonstration is not confusing us either. Majority of this will be live demonstration, so we'll kind of go ahead and go forward. So let's start with this first slide deck. So why majority of our successful clients leverage sensitive data definitions? It really boils down to 3 simple reasons. The first one is ultimately a greater accuracy of search results. That's a really big one. So if you have issues where you're finding that the Spirion platform, the out-of-the-box recognizers, the any find definitions aren't as accurate as you need them to be, this is definitely the place where I'd direct you. Another thing is it allows us to identify and discover unique sensitive data elements. which are specific or unique to different organizations. So examples of that might be like FERPA data if you are in higher ed, or it might be ITAR data if you are, contracting with the DoD and so forth. Some of those are pretty unique and niche, so it allows you to use the Spirion platform to identify very unique and customized data elements. And then the last part is the greater efficiency that you get when it comes to analyzing results in the console and in your reporting, and the ability to actually take remediation actions on those results are all benefits of using sensitive data definitions. So some terminology that I'm going to be using, and we should probably talk about this first, is three of the big ones is regular expressions. So a regular expression is ultimately just a way to describe a pattern or a string of text in a document in this context, or really in any data location, so like databases or websites or things like that. A regular expression would fall under what we call a sensitive data type, and a sensitive data type is simply a component of a sensitive data definition. So they are the custom components that somebody might use to create a sensitive data definition. So when I say sensitive data type or SDT, that's what that is. So it can be either a regular expression, it can be a keyword, it can be a dictionary, so a list of words, or it can also actually be I know this part might be a little confusing, but it can also be a different sensitive data definition as well. And a sensitive data definition, ultimately what that is, it's a combination of sensitive data types, which are the custom data elements that you put together and are out of the box, sometimes out of the box, any fine definitions, which are our platform's built-in recognizers. Combining with filter logic to allow you to have greater control over what you're returning back to the console and the results that you're discovering. So some basic concepts that we're going to be going through are, so some things to know is understanding what a logical operator is. So an and or, it's a pretty easy idea, but just the and or statement to make something true or false. That's going to be something we're going to cover, and I'll show you that in context, but I just want to make you aware of that. I also want to kind of highlight the idea of what a false positive rate is, because one of the downsides or kind of gotchas with our platform is the fact that when results are returned to the console, oftentimes if you're looking through those results and you see a lot of false positives, you can kind of get a skewed perspective of what the false positive rate really was. So ultimately, when you're calculating a false positive rate, the important thing to keep in mind is that when the Spirion agent is searching files or other locations, ultimately on every single file, it's going to make a decision on whether or not it has sensitive data in there or it doesn't have sensitive data in it. And so to calculate the true false positive rate, you have to understand that you have to look at how many files are actually searched. And so for example, if you search the 100 files, 10 of them got flagged of having sensitive data in them, you reviewed those files and you found that 5 of them actually didn't contain sensitive data. If you were just looking at the console, you might say, oh, I got 10 matches and half of them aren't real, so I got a 50% false positive rate. The truth of the matter is you got a 95% accuracy rate at that time. So just keeping that in mind when you're kind of evaluating is important. And then another concept is to start with smaller searches. So ultimately, you'll get the most benefit from using sensitive data definitions if you keep your searches relatively small in size, so that way it gives you time to optimize the sensitive data definition to return more of the things that you wanted and less of the things you don't. And that way, so if I'm like searching a large file server, I might break it up into multiple pieces so that into smaller searches so that I can ultimately adjust it as I go along. So just kind of an important concept. And ultimately, sensitive data definitions are really good. You can create like a ton of them for a ton of different reasons, but what I'd recommend is that you focus on the sensitive data definitions to protect your most sensitive data or discover your most sensitive data in your environment. And the other thing is the last concept is coordinating with internal departments. It is really critical that when you're doing this and you're creating sensitive data definitions for the first time, that you don't try to do it in a vacuum and you don't do it on your own. It does require a significant amount of coordinating with other departments, talking to them about what Spirion is, and helping them to protect the elements that they think are sensitive. So that's pretty much it. And I'm gonna now flip it over to my instance of the console. And if anybody has any questions while I am getting my console set up, please feel free to ask them. Just take a second.
We
All
had
right,
one pretty simple question come in right after that last bullet point.
great.
You said to coordinate with internal departments. Somebody asked, what internal departments would you recommend going to first to really find out what the primary sensitive data you should be looking for is?
Great question. So that's an awesome question. So largely it's going to be dependent upon obviously the unique needs of your organization and ultimately your compliance goals. But if I was to give you a general recommendation, my recommendation would be to talk to your HR department, find out what like onboarding paperwork looks like. I would also talk to maybe my finance department and talk to them about what documents they're really concerned about having leaked or breached or anything like that. So those are two easy departments that I'm sure that the majority of people on the call probably have within their organization. So those would be, just off the top of my head, the first two that I would probably go to.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. So to start off, what we're going to do is we're going to start with regular expressions so that I can kind of give you a quick demonstration of where any fine definitions might basically, one of the problems with just using an any fine definition on its own. So I know that there are clients that are successful using any fine definitions on their own, and if they're working for you, then I say go ahead and keep doing that. This is obviously not going to be a blanket statement for everyone, but I can tell you that I would still incorporate sensitive data definitions if you are just using any fines. So all right, so the first thing is, and this is going to be a little bit of a question to myself, but I usually start this off by saying, asking a question, which is, how many people think that a social security number is sensitive? And majority of people that I've asked this question to, their initial response is, yeah, that's, really sensitive. And I say, okay, so if I have a number here, and let's pretend for a moment that this number matches a number that's in the Social Security Administration's database. So it's a real Social Security number, and they're like, is that sensitive? And they'll say, yeah, that's very sensitive. And I say, okay, cool. Well, it's easy to write a regular expression to match this number. It's a digit, which is the \D. And then I'm going to put a quantifier in here. And I'm not going to teach you regular expressions. That's not the goal of this webinar. So don't worry too much if this doesn't make a lot of sense. Just kind of pay attention to the match information, what I'm matching on right here. And you don't really have to worry about like the technical side here. So I can see there's a hyphen in between. I know that there's another 2 digits. So I'm going to put a quantifier right here. And I see another hyphen. So I'm going to match that. And I also see there's another string of 4 digits following that. So now you guys can see I'm matching my social security number here. And this would be returned to the console if I use a regular expression. So this is kind of like using a social security number any find on its own, is I'm matching it. It's a true social, it's being returned to my console. Somebody might say, well, wait, Kyle, like, what if the social doesn't have the dash in between? I say, okay, well, great, we can build that as flexibility into here. But the second that I do this, I'm gonna run into some real big problems, because now any 9-digit number, 9, is going to now return to my console. And this very well might be a true social security number, but what happens if it's presented like this? Well, I think everybody can agree that now it's not very sensitive. It's just an item number. And while us as human beings can look at this and read and understand the context, a computer is pretty dumb. So it would still probably return this. We could add some more logic into the regular expression, but now we're going to get really complicated on regex to say, okay, well, ultimately we only care about the number if there's like SSN in front or social security number. or something like that, some kind of keyword. And maybe there's a, a colon, or maybe there's a hashtag afterwards, and then maybe a space. That will be good. So right here, SSN, good, we're matching on that. And here's our full match. And now it has validation built into it. So maybe this is more like what our any finds are. But the truth is like, this is getting more and more complex and more difficult to write. And that is why we are going to use sensitive data definitions to make our lives easier, so we don't have to become experts at regular expressions. So as long as everyone kind of understands, like, ultimately what I'm doing is I'm adding context into what I'm trying to capture. So notice how this one is not matching anymore because it's not preceded by SSN or the word social security number. If I put social security number here in front, oh, if I can spell, now it's matching. So if you don't want to learn regular expressions and you don't want to become an expert at that, I can completely understand. So where this becomes useful is now kind of shifting this over to sensitive data definitions and kind of how to build those. And I'll walk you guys through the process. We'll build one together, and we'll kind of build one to accomplish some specific tasks. And then we'll kind of leave it open for questions. So starting
Before you
off,
jump into that, Kyle, I did have one question about the regex that you were using. I put the website up because people asked what that website was that you're using, which is
yep,
regex101.com. And somebody asked, is this a place where I might be able to go to learn more about regular expressions?
great
And
question.
I didn't know. So
Yeah, so I can give a couple recommendations on that. So I like this site a lot. There's a cheat sheet right here in the bottom part. So if you're really good, if regular expressions are something that you've been exposed to, maybe you've worked with Linux or something like that before, and you've grepped files and things like that, this site is great for you if you've been exposed to regular expressions before, because it's got a cheat sheet and it will tell you basically everything you need to know right here. The thing that I always recommend to the clients that I work with, and there's a better site called regex1, and regex1 is probably the best tutorial site that I can recommend. It'll take you 15 minutes to go through their tutorial, and once you're at the end of it, I promise you have plenty of knowledge at that point to be very successful using Spirion and the regular custom recognizers. So this would be the one I'd recommend. If you're a visual person, Debug X is also a really good regular expression debug site, is what I'll call it, because it'll allow you to see what that looks like in basic like paths. So like it shows you kind of as a decision tree. So if you're maybe more visual and you like it more to see what these things actually mean, that's how this one breaks it down. So all three sites are useful. I've used all three of them a lot. So the one I probably use the most now is regex 101, but I do recommend checking out those sites. So we'll be sure to give you some documentation with the links to those at the
okay,
end.
and if you want to grab them right now, I went ahead and put those in the chat window for everyone. So thank you, Kyle.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. All right, so back into the Spirion console. So in order to get to our sensitive data types and start playing with them, what you want to do is you first would log in, and you need to go to the admin tab all the way on the right. On the left-hand side, you're going to see a bunch of different options, and you're going to go down to the sensitive data types right here. And this will bring up a list of a bunch of sensitive data types that we've taken care of and created the regular expressions for you for different types of things. Mainly, this is for GDPR, but that doesn't mean it's not useful for other things. So let's first create a sensitive data type that's custom using a regular expression. And one of the ones that we can use is oftentimes name is a really good, it's a really easy regular expression to write. And so I'll show you guys really quick what I mean by that. And when I say name, I don't mean that I'm gonna write a regular expression to match a human name. I'm just gonna write a regular expression to match the actual word name. So right here, I'm gonna go to let me do that a little slower. So I'm going to go to the add button on the top left-hand corner to create a new sensitive data type. And once I click that, I'm going to be presented with this screen. The first thing that I need to decide is what data type I want to create. So I can use a keyword, I can use a regular expression, a dictionary, sensitive data definition, or search API or exact match. We'll kind of talk a little bit about these ones because these are the ones you're primarily going to use the most. I'm not going to talk a lot about search API at all, and exact match we might talk about a little bit, but the ones that you'll probably focus on the most is keyword, regular expression, dictionary, and sensitive data definition. The reason I don't like using keywords always is because keywords are case sensitive. So ultimately, if something appears like a keyword in a page, but it uses a different capitalization than what I have here, then it's not going to match. So it's not as flexible as using what I primarily use as a regular expression. So we're going to start, and I should go through the other ones too. Sorry. So a dictionary is just a list of words that you can import via text file. So you can create a long list of words and bring it in. I have had a few clients who have been concerned, like, by saying, hey, we are uploading a really large dictionary file that's got like 36,000 lines in it. That's not that big a deal. Just know that like that's what it'd be for. So if you have a really long list of keywords or something, or employee names or something like that, feel free to load it in that way. Sensitive data definitions are combinations of all these plus any finds. And an exact match is more for if you're doing subject access requests and things like that. So we're not going to really talk a lot about exact match, but that's kind of a high level overview on that. So right here, we're going to first start off by creating a regular expression to match the word name. So that's going to be really easy. We're going to put an A, and then we're going to put a dash, and then I'm going to write name. And I'm going to call this name keyword. And then I'm going to put at the end of it reg X. I'm pretty specific about when I name my sensitive data types because this list can get out of hand pretty quickly. You can already see out of the box, it comes with 158 regular expressions built in. So to keep my life easy, I like to be able to easily separate the ones that I create by putting an A in the front. And then I also put regex at the end just to remind myself not to use it in a production search or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in name, and that's the extent of my regular expression. Pretty simple. The nice thing about our regular expression engine is it is case insensitive, so it doesn't really matter if it's capitalized or not, it still will match. Now, ultimately, I would never use this to search on its own because I really don't want to return every single document in my environment back to my console that has the word name in it. So that's kind of an issue. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to create a sensitive data definition that utilizes this to identify personal data, or what we might call like personally identifiable information. So I'm going to go to add another data type, and this time I'm going to select sensitive data definition. We're going to call this one personal information, and we're going to say SDD. Cool. So right here, I'm going to then click the definition part. So after I give it a name, and this one is going to be one that we're going to use in a search, I'm going to go to the next part and define the definition. So I'm going to go to the definition section, click the ... and I'm presented with this screen. So this is where filter logic comes in and the operators. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, okay, what I want to find is, first off, that name keyword regex that we created a second ago. So I'm going to bring this guy over and say, okay. So this is just like a filter, and what I would say is I typically stick with the inequalities. So right here is the best one that I use pretty much all the time is I choose greater than or equals to 1. And what this means is if a document or a location contains the word name and there's more than one or greater than or equal to 1 instances of that, then we should consider it to be a match or a true statement. I'm going to now add another line in. So more filter logic. And here's where my first operator shows up. I'm going to see the word and appear. This UI can be a little confusing for people at first. So I'll show you an easy trick to basically be able to read this and understand this. But what we're going to say is, all right, it's going to be a name with a social security number. So if I see a name, the word name, and I see something that looks like a social security number in a document, now we should consider this to be a match. So the way I do recommend learning how to read these sensitive data definitions is start with the line first, the first line, read that to yourself. So and just start it with, if a document were to contain this keyword and there's more than one or equal to one unique matches, then go to the operator above it and a social security number, and there's more than one, then we should consider it a match. That's the easy way to do it, is start with the line, then say the operator, then say the next line, and then go back to the operator. We're going to build more and more into this in a second. So obviously personal information isn't limited to a social security number. So I'm going to add another operator into our sensitive data definition. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually use the plus sign from the last line that I put here, where its social security number is greater than or equal to 1. I'm going to click this, and that's going to create a new operator. The first thing I'm going to say is going to be an or statement. And I'm going to say, well, here's the other things that I think would constitute as personal information. There might be a credit card. Or, so now I'm going to add another line, but I want to keep it under the same operator. So I'm going to add it from the operator instead of adding it from the line, because I don't want to create a new operator. Every single time you click from the line, it creates a new operator. So I just want to keep it within this. So it could be a social security number, or it could be a date of birth. It could be a bank account number, and so forth and so forth and so forth. As far as, like, we could go down the list and add a lot more in here, but this is a good kind of starting point. So the way that I would read this and the way that I would understand it is, again, we'll start with the line first. So I'll say, if a document were to contain the word name and a social security number, or, so notice how I go to the next operator because that's the one right above it, or a credit card number, or a date of birth, or a bank account number, we should consider that to be a match underneath this definition, which is the personal data definition. Does that kind of, hopefully that makes sense to people. I'll pause for just a quick second to see if anybody has any quick questions on this, because I know it's a little confusing. Cool. So we'll move on from there. I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to be the first one I create. Here's the ones, if you're looking for the first sensitive data definitions you should create, I'd find the AnyFind definitions that you're currently using. And my first recommendation would be create a sensitive data definition just using the AnyFind definitions on their own. So if you're using a social security number AnyFind definition in your environment, I would recommend creating a SSN SDD. So again, I put the A in front just so I can always find it. It shows up at the top of the list when I hit the name column. And I notate at the end SDD, because that lets me know when we go to do this, that use this in a search, that I would use this recognizer rather than one that says regex at the end. Your sensitive data definition doesn't need to be complicated, and it shouldn't be at the very beginning. It might just be one line. So here's an example of one that I've used with several clients, where if they're interested in locating documents that contain social security numbers, it can be as simple as using one of the AnyFinds greater than or equals to 1 unique matches. So I'm going to say OK and put it like there. I'm going to create one more, which is for credit card numbers, and then I'm going to run a few searches for you so you can kind of see why. We'll talk through the full cycle of using a sensitive data definition as I set it up on a search. So the last one I'm going to create is for credit card number. And I'm going to go ahead and click the definition thing again. We're going to go and select right here. grab the credit card number, any find definition, put it right here, hit OK, say greater than or equals to 1, say OK. All right, so these are these are good to go. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to set up a quick policy, and I'm going to show you guys what a search looks like when you've used an any find definition, and then kind of the differences of why searching with a sensitive data definition, and it'll be pretty apparent why a sensitive data definition might be more beneficial. So I'll create the policy really quick. We're just going to do a test file search, and I'm just going to kind of talk through creating the policy just as a review for people. So I'm figuring out who's doing the search. In this case, I'm going to have both my agents do the search. I'm going to define first off what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for credit card numbers. So this time I'm going to use an any find definition. We're going to hit OK, and I'm going to enable social security numbers on their own. And we're going to hit OK. I know that I want to search a file location, so I'm going to go to the locations settings portion, files, and I'm going to go ahead and enable file searching. And I'm going to go to set the scope of the location. So I'm going to set this to a custom folder, so that's not searching my entire computer. And I got to last basically figure out where my demo data set lives. It lives right here. So I'm going to add that in. Make sure I flip it over to include in search. Hit the green check mark, and my search is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and fire this up and let it go. We're going to call this the any find test. Stop all instances. Run as soon as possible. As best practice, we'd recommend that if you're running searches like this, that you would expire the task, to not show up, to not execute after a certain period of time. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to hit OK. This should take a couple seconds for it to run. And we're going to kind of look at the results as they returned when they're in any find definition, and then we'll look at it as a how they're returned using the sensitive data definition that we created. So as we're watching the search, the first sub-tab I go to is scheduled searches to make sure that my task name appeared here. As soon as it does, what I'm really looking for on this sub-tab is for that task to appear for both computers, and then I'm waiting for a play button to appear underneath the state column right there. Once that's going, I know the search is running, so I can go to searches in progress, and it looks like I did not find anything. So that was not expected. Apologies on that. All good things. So all right, try that one more time just to see. And if that doesn't work, then I will show it to you a different way. So apologies. Setting it up again, stop all instances, expire the task, never run. Oh, I know what I did. I accidentally hit this button. So, okay. There we go, this time for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and schedule this. I'll go back to the tasks or status tab. And what I'm gonna do is go to the scheduled searches. Again, here's my test, show up, my task is good. And in a second, we should see that play button appear in the state column. It's appearing there for HR. And And this is not, this is the old one. And again, apologies guys that I'm having some technical difficulties on the call. I apologize on that. We'll run it from here. I have a backup plan. So let me toss this data set onto the desktop and search it from here.
This is not related to sensitive data definitions specifically, but I do have a question.
Yes.
And that
please.
is, if we want to find the most sensitive data that any finds have, why don't we just have them all turned on for policies by default?
It's a great question. So you'll see in a second what I'm trying to show, and actually I realized what happened is by default, so this is a test environment that I've spun up, and by default, I told it not to search the demo dataset folder so that those don't come up as false positives. So moving it to the desktop should be fine. But the reason why is simply a matter of, there's a couple reasons. So first off, when you're using an any-find definition on its own, you're going to get the unique matches of every single thing that we believe to be a social security number returned to your console. That sounds great at the beginning because you're like, yeah, I really want to see like the actual social or the actual PII element that you're trying to locate. But if you imagine that like a single spreadsheet could have 20,000 socials on it, you really don't have, like, it's too difficult to look at 20,000 matches and realize that you just got through reviewing one document. So that's one reason. The other thing is that your database performance will significantly improve if you are using any sensitive data definitions the way that I'm going to show you here. So I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, please definitely feel free to shoot another message in while I'm struggling to get this guy doing what I want it to do. So
that answers the question. So thank you.
yep, absolutely, not a problem. So we'll do this one more time, cross your fingers and hope that everything goes as expected. It should. So once again, last time, third time's the charm. We're in, I see my task has appeared. I'm gonna go ahead and refresh again until I can see that play button appear here. And then the second that the play button appears for both of these, we should go to the searches in progress tab. And did I get it? Okay. So the one that's going to actually do the search is the HR computer with the long GUID. The reason why there's a long GUID is because I switched it over to checking in here. So, and there was already a computer that had that name. So you should see 3 searches in progress happen. If we don't, there we go. This should be the one that should be the successful one. The other ones aren't connected. So and this one looks like it's good. So so in a moment here, the results will be returned to the console and we can kind of take a look at them. I'm going to go ahead and try to, yeah, here we go. So this searched the same 13 out of 14 files, and notice how there's only 16 matches. So if I go to my results screen now, under here, and I choose the computer that, oh, it's not quite there yet. So the uploads tab, make sure my upload comes in. There we go. Now they're there. And there's my results. So instead of having 13,000 rows to look through, I only have 16 rows that I need to check. And ultimately, this is a lot easier to look at and a lot easier for me to make decisions off of versus 13,000 rows of data. Now, there are some limitations, of course, like if I wanted to query, like if I had a specific social and then I couldn't, but ultimately this would show me the same kind of information that yes, this document does contain a social or a credit card number. So the last really quick part that I want to show you guys is how I would use this to eliminate a false positive, and why sensitive data definitions are so powerful and what you ultimately get from them. So let's say, for example, that we wanted to not match on the sample credit card data. So I might open this file up and I notice that, hey, ARC Vault, let's say that's a pretty unique word and something that we're not going to find a lot of. And I say documents that contain ARC Vault are really just fake documents. So I don't want to see those results ever return again. So I'm going to go back to my console over here. And I'm going to go back to my sensitive data definition that I created, which was the CCN SDD, because that's the one that contained the credit card data. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a quick regular expression off of ARC Vault. So to eliminate this as a match. So this is a negative keyword for CCN, regex. And I'm going to put ARC Vault here. And then ultimately, I'm going to use that in combination with the one that we created earlier so that it doesn't return again. So I'm going to add another operator in, and I'm going to say, okay, if the document contains the word ARC Vault, then don't return it to the console. The way you use it to eliminate matches is instead of having greater than or equals to, you can just put a less than 1. So we'll run the search one last time just so you can see it. And we'll notice that this time when we run the search, the ones that contained ARC Vault aren't returned back to the console. So let me simplify this really quick and change it to this computer. I'll switch it to run as soon as possible and expire after tomorrow. And we'll do it one more time to make sure everything's well. So again, I'll go to my scheduled searches. I'll refresh until I see that play button appear underneath the state column. There's my play button. I know my search is in progress. Here's my new task, test ARC Vault. So I know the search is running. And this time, if everything goes as planned, I should have less results return from this search. So in a couple of seconds, this will wrap up. And while we're waiting for the results to come back, does anybody have any other questions that they'd like to ask as far as in regards to sensitive data definitions or anything like that?
The only other question that I had is when you were picking those greater than, less than, there looked like there was a bunch of other things there. How do I know what they mean?
Yep, absolutely. Great question. So the other operator or the other filter logics that you can use, and so we'll go through that, is instead of using inequality, you might use things like near. And what near means is it's within 50 characters by default. You can change this. It's a setting in the system policies. So near just means within 50 characters. If you say near with distance, it's within 50 characters. And there's an additional setting that you can set on what the distance amount is. Near before means 50 characters before, near after means 50 characters after, and so forth and so forth. So there's a lot of different things you can use. One that you might say is that you require or allow, but typically I would say I wouldn't concern myself as much with like which operator you're most comfortable with. They'll all work the same way. And if you'd like to get a full detail, there is a great part of our user guide in the console section for the console user guide in our support portal that I'd recommend taking a look at, which goes through what each one of those filter logics allows you to do in very high level detail or in great detail. So our
Cool.
results should be here now. So I'm going to filter really quick on that to show you that we eliminated the amount of matches. So notice on the first search we ran that was successful, there was 16 matches. The second search that we ran where we took out the documents that contained our fault, there's only 9 matches. So that's kind of why you would want to use sensitive data definitions, because again, you can continuously modify these, optimize them as you're doing searches and get better and better results each time you're doing it. So that's kind of the high level overview. I wanted to cover a little bit more, but I apologize for the technical difficulties. We'll make sure to get you guys some documentation and things like that. And you are also welcome to reach out to me if you have questions or talk with your customer success manager, who should also be able to provide you some guidance on this type of thing. So let me go ahead and flip over to our last slide. And
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for bearing with me. Apologies for the technical difficulties, and hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something from it.
Yeah, we're going to continue to build on these. So we'll have the sensitive data definitions again, based on some of the questions that we received and any feedback that we get. We will adapt this, and you'll see this webinar come up again either later this year or early next year. We're also going to be hosting several others like it, so please stick with us, and we really appreciate you being here today. Thanks, everybody, and have yourself a good evening.